Let's go Dolphins! What if I told you the Miami Dolphins are seriously considering a move that could either set them up for dominance or leave fans questioning everything on draft night? There's a strategy forming right now that no one is talking about the right way, and when it unfolds, it's going to catch a lot of people off guard. Before I expose what's really going on, do your part, smash that like button if you still believe this team is building something special. And I want only the true believers here. Go down in the comments and write, "Go Dolphins!" I trust this process. Here's what's catching everyone's attention right now. According to new draft intel, the Dolphins are expected to be extremely active across all 3 days of the draft. Not passive, not reactive, active. That alone already tells you this front office is not sitting back and hoping talent falls to them. They're preparing to move, to strike, and possibly to surprise everyone watching. And the biggest clue? It all comes down to philosophy. Sullivan, coming from the Green Bay system, appears to be leaning heavily into a very specific approach, targeting premium positions early and leaving skill depth, especially wide receiver, for later rounds. This is not random. This is calculated. So let's break that down like we're in the war room. Premium positions in the NFL are clear: quarterback, offensive tackle, cornerback, edge rusher, and wide receiver. But here's the twist. While wide receiver is technically a premium position, the depth in this class is so strong that Miami may actually pass on it early. Instead, the focus could shift heavily toward offensive line and cornerback with those first 2 picks at 11 and 30. And honestly, it makes a lot of sense. The Dolphins have multiple needs: offensive line, corner, edge, even safety, and tight end. But what stands out is how the board is expected to fall. At pick 11, the value might strongly favor offensive linemen or cornerbacks rather than edge rushers. And if that's the case, Miami could lock in a foundational piece early and then adapt at pick 30 depending on how things unfold. Now here's where things get spicy. There are names being discussed internally that could completely divide the fan base. On one hand, you've got players like Francis Maui-Noah, seen as a versatile lineman who could transform the offensive front. On the other, there are elite prospects like Vanga Yawan, who, despite not playing a premium position, might simply be too good to pass up. We're talking about a player some believe could become an all-pro guard by year 3. So what do? Stick to positional value, or take the best football player available? That's the dilemma. And it doesn't stop there. At cornerback, there are clear targets as well, and depending on how the board shakes out, Miami could pivot quickly if their top offensive line options are gone. Meanwhile, edge rusher becomes a very specific scenario. If a top-tier name like Ruben Bain is off the board, the Dolphins may completely avoid that position at 11 and wait until later. And then comes the second layer of strategy, pick 30. This is where the draft could really open up. Corners, edge rushers, even offensive tackles could still be available at strong value. And because of that, Miami has the flexibility to double down on premium positions before even thinking about wide receiver. Let that sink in. A team that many expected to chase offensive weapons early might actually build through the trenches and defense first, and then go hunting for receivers on day 2 and 3, where the depth is rich and the risk is lower. And we're not even done yet. There's also growing buzz about potential trades. Not just small moves, but real strategic shifts. Trading down from pick 11 could be on the table if it brings back additional top 100 picks. That would signal one thing loud and clear. This front office is prioritizing volume, youth, and long-term roster stability over flashy single picks. And here's where things start to heat up even more, because if you really connect all the dots, you begin to see a front office that is not just thinking about this draft. They're thinking about reshaping the entire identity of the Miami Dolphins moving forward. We're talking about a roster that was stripped down this offseason, and now the mission is very clear: inject as much young, affordable talent as possible. That's not just a strategy, it's a reset button. And when you have 11 draft picks at your disposal, you're not just building depth, you're building competition across every single position group. Now let's go deeper into what this really means for draft weekend. If Miami follows this premium positions early philosophy, we could realistically see a scenario where they come out of the first 3 picks, 11, 30, and 43, with something like offensive line, cornerback, and edge rusher. And if that happens, I'm telling you right now, this team instantly becomes more balanced, more physical, and more dangerous heading into 2026. But here's the twist that not everyone is talking about enough. Even though the plan points one way, the Dolphins are leaving the door wide open for flexibility. If a top-tier talent unexpectedly falls, whether it's a safety like Caleb Downs, a linebacker like Sonny Styles, or even a wide receiver slipping further than expected, Miami could flip the script in seconds. This is not a rigid plan. This is controlled aggression. And speaking of aggression, let's talk trades, because this might be where things explode. There is a real belief that Miami could move down from pick 11 if the right offer comes in. And not just any offer, we're talking about a first-round swap plus an additional top 100 pick. That tells you something very important. This front office values quantity and quality. They want more swings, more chances to hit. And honestly, when your roster has multiple holes, that approach makes a lot of sense. But don't rule out the opposite either. With 4 third-round picks, Miami has the ammunition to move up on day 2. Imagine packaging a couple of those picks to jump into the late second round and grab a player they absolutely love. That's how you control the board instead of reacting to it. Now let's circle back to one of the most debated topics right now, wide receiver. A lot of fans expected Miami to prioritize this early, but based on everything we're seeing, that might not happen. And the reason is simple: depth. This draft class is loaded with receivers in rounds 2, 3, and even 4. So instead of forcing a pick at 11 or 30, the Dolphins could wait and then strike twice in that 75 to 94 range where they have multiple selections. That's how you maximize value without reaching. And if they pull that off, you're looking at a draft class that fills needs at offensive line, defense, and still adds explosive weapons later on. That's how contenders are built. But let me be real with you for a second. This entire strategy comes down to execution. It's one thing to have a plan. It's another to read the board correctly, to know when to trade, when to stay, and when to take that risk on a player others passed on. And that's why this draft could define the early era of John Eric Sullivan as general manager. Will he stick to the Green Bay style blueprint and dominate the trenches early? Or will he take a bold swing if a star talent starts to slide? This is where legacies begin. And this is exactly where things could take a dramatic turn. Because if the Miami Dolphins do decide to trade down from pick 11, you're not just talking about shifting a few spots. You're talking about changing the entire structure of this draft class. Think about it like this. If Miami moves from 11 to, let's say, 14, 15, or even 16, and picks up an additional second or third round pick, suddenly those 11 total selections turn into even more firepower. And in a draft where depth is one of the biggest strengths, especially at positions like wide receiver, corner, and even offensive line, that could be the move that defines everything. Because now instead of hitting on just 2 or 3 key players, you're giving yourself 5, 6, maybe even 7 real chances to land contributors. But here's the part that should make every Dolphins fan lean forward a little bit. Trading down sounds great in theory, until the player you wanted becomes a star somewhere else. That's the gamble. If a guy like Francis Maui Noah is sitting there at 11 and you pass on him, and then he turns into a franchise cornerstone for another team, that decision will be talked about for years. On the flip side, if you trade down and still land a high-level starter plus extra picks that turn into impact players, you look like a genius. This is the razor's edge the front office is walking right now. And let's not forget something else that quietly became one of the most important elements of this entire plan, the financial side of the roster. By focusing on rookie contracts, Miami is clearly trying to build a sustainable core. Not just a team that competes for one season, but a team that can stay competitive for multiple years without being crushed by cap issues. That's how teams like the Chiefs and Eagles have stayed in contention: young talent, controlled costs, and smart drafting. Now imagine this scenario for a second. The Dolphins walk away from this